Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Be Remote podcast. We have for today's episode Bahadir. He is the co-founder and CEO at Fabrikatör. Fabrikatör is a supply planning and software that minimizes the revenue loss of D2C brands, direct-to-consumer brands, by preventing out stockouts. Right. So this is a pretty interesting domain you are on to, Bahadir. In fact, I see the future of e-commerce, more of D2C. I can see that picking up wave across multiple different categories, whether it's cosmetics, supply chain, and things like that. So, Bahadir, so you're onto something big. Yeah, this is a space that I keenly follow and pretty excited about. So Bahadir, over to you. Probably a quick introduction about you and your company, Fabrikatör, Bahadir. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. So a bit about myself, maybe. My name is Bahadir. I'm originally from Istanbul, Turkey, currently located in Germany, Berlin. Um, I started my career as a data scientist in telco, and then I moved to different startups and corporate roles as a product manager. I did work in like tourism, travel, fintech, robo advisory, and finally e-commerce. So at Fabrikatör, we're building a supply planning platform for direct-to-consumer brands where we prevent them running out of stock by forecasting their inventory needs and then planning it according to their lead times with manufacturers. We know this is a big problem in the industry because D2Cs are limited by the lead times they have from their manufacturers. When a traditional retailer is running out of stock, they can just source products from the market by going to wholesalers. It's ready
Yep.
to
Yep.
supply if you pay for it. But for a
Yep.
D2C company, it needs to get manufactured from scratch. So the lead
Yep.
times are long and running out of stock is an expensive problem. And that's why we started this product in November. It's quite fresh, actually. It's a
Mhm.
pivot of our original product, which was a manufacturing management platform where we were serving to the market from the other end, from the manufacturer side. And now we switch sides and helping the brands on the other end. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. For everyone on the podcast here today, so Bahadir has a very interesting story of starting the company fully remotely and also doing the complete fundraising remotely. Right. So he has been a product manager himself, and we during our episode today, like when we'll talk more about how to operate in a product management in a remote setup, and also from a founder's perspective on how do we run the company remotely, probably the fundraising. So Bahadir, you have really exciting story, especially rightly fit for the times. I think audience would be super excited to hear your story, Bahadir. So probably I'll start with the first one. So Bahadir, so how's your journey as a founder, being a founder, especially in a remote setup? So how was your fundraising journey? Probably your hiring part, from a founder's, 30,000 feet view, from top down view. So how is remote for you, and how is it going as of today, Bahadir?
Yeah, we have a pretty interesting story about this because in 2018, we founded Fabrikatör with my classmate from university. And right after we founded the company, I moved to Germany because I already had a contract here. Everything was settled. So that was kind of an interesting coincidence. But that actually made us a remote company from day one. We founded the company in Turkey while I was in Germany. And we hired people. We acquired more than 250 customers in Turkey, and they're all doing physical work, like they're manufacturers. So normally I would go visit them by car, and that's
Yeah,
actually the reality of the industry too. But
yeah,
we managed to get everything done remotely. For 2 years, we ran the company bootstrapped until 2020. And then for 2020, our goal was to get invested to scale up our company because at Bootstrap, we managed to scale it up to a point we wanted to get more velocity. And the initial plan was to raise some funds from an accelerator in the United States. So for that reason, I flew to US, to New York in March, where Corona wasn't a thing yet
yep,
in US
yep,
at
yep,
least.
yep,
And
yep.
while I was getting like pretty interesting intros and meetings with investors, accelerators, all of a sudden our neighborhood in New York got the lockdown. Like first incidents started to happen, and I just flew back to Germany with a rescue flight. Like we bought a ticket and then took the plane in 3 hours. It was like a movie. I felt like The doors were
Yeah, super
the
crazy.
airport. We jumped in,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
not prepared. We don't have hand sanitizer. We don't have masks. That was all of a journey. And then when I came back to Germany, the world was already in lockdown, and I didn't leave my home for months in that sense. But as a company, we had to make a decision. So our option for raising funds from US was not an option anymore, and we had to find an alternative way. As we always did, we did a very swift move and start to approach accelerators, investors in Berlin. Me being here for 3 years helps me with the network, and we got funded by a German fund called APX, which was an
Mhm.
accelerator when we joined. And now they're a very early stage VC funded by Porsche, the car manufacturer that you know, and also a media company, Axel Springer.
Yeah.
So starting from there, we did the whole fundraising and due diligence remote and online.
Wow, this is super exciting, Bahadir. In fact, congrats on your fundraise, especially during such a difficult times. Like I mean, it's I assume like that's one crazy experience that you had in New York. I still remember, like especially when the pandemic started. Like I mean, especially the New York and New Jersey part, the East Coast. Like I mean, so it was having like so many cases. We used to hear so much news about that particular region. Like I mean, it was like full of cases, like very concentrated in terms of COVID. Like I mean, it was pretty crazy. I think we all survived COVID that way. I think, Bahadir, like I mean, so I think thank God. So like I mean, so I think hopefully things will be better going forward in terms of how things are shaping up. And congrats on your fundraise. This is a pretty crazy experience, Bahadir. And so how was the due diligence and other experiences like I mean in a fundraise? Like I mean, probably if you can touch upon few points like how was your pitching? Like I mean, so
Mhm.
generally when you're talking to investors like so there's a bit of body language element. They figure out how you are confident, your body vibes, like I mean, so the entire what do you call a real world scenario, right? Like, I mean, so how is that in a virtual world experience, like I mean probably on a Zoom call, in fact even getting the documents signed, like getting the contracting done, and like I mean so probably the due diligence aspect of it, like I mean so in fact, one due diligence is probably the numbers in terms of finances, like I mean, so how you're doing and all. But generally, investors also wanted to talk to some of the employees, customers, existing customers, potential customers. Like they also want to do a lot of market research. And given that you are in a physical, like I mean, supply chain, like when real, you some of your clients are in a real world setup. So how was that experience in terms of the overall fundraising journey, Bahadir?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty good question. Thank you for that. Our case was a bit actually extremely difficult because we were in supply chain business, and around this time, like last year, April, May, supply chains were broken and
Yep.
manufacturers were
Yep.
having hard time procuring
Yep.
their materials from China. So
Yep.
everyone was asking the question if it is a good time to invest into a manufacturing app because seems
Yep.
like it's going to stop. And we were asking the same question to ourselves as well. And then we started to do like health check calls with our existing users just to ask them like, how are you doing? Are you going to your factory? Are you able to source products? And then we found out that they were actually having difficulties sourcing some products from China and overseas. And then we start to think like, what can we do without any financial expectations or
Yep.
any revenue
Yep.
for us? Like we want to help because if the industry goes down, if our manufacturers don't produce, we don't bring any value.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And then
Yep.
we built how to say like a support network for
Sure.
manufacturers where they can list the raw materials they need and the materials they produce. So the local producer manufacturers in Turkey were able to exchange products with each other if they are not able to source it from other countries. And we had quite a good momentum there. A lot of companies signed up, listed their products. It also psychologically helped them when we called and asked like, how are you doing? I'm not selling anything, I'm not trying to push anything to you, I'm just wondering like, how are you doing as a manufacturer because you're in a
Yep.
difficult
Yep.
times. So
Yep.
that was a very relieving call for most of our
Uh,
users. We got pretty good
yep.
feedbacks, and that point we included this in our pitches, even though this is not going to
Sure.
be our core product. This showed
Sure.
the investors that we are swift in a way
Yeah.
that we are able to adapt to the changing conditions.
Yeah.
And this is the benefit of being an early stage startup, because
Yeah.
big corporates takes longer times
Yeah.
to
It
adapt.
takes so much. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So like if you're a 1 2 people 10 people company, you are holding the steering wheel, and you can
Yeah.
ride it to the way you want. So
Yeah.
if you do it smartly, I think it helps a lot, which uh, was appreciated by the investors that we talked to. In terms of due diligence, i I agree with the difficulties of pitching
Yeah.
online.
Yeah. Yeah.
First, like I don't like sending PDF pitches or PowerPoints over email,
Yeah.
because like it needs to have a story. The narration
Mm.
adds on top of your
Yeah. Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah.
And I was already thinking, like, how can we overcome this communication difficulty? So just as we are doing now, I recorded videos on Zoom, pitching, and then I send out the video plus the pitch deck if they want to go back and look into details, which worked pretty well for us. We did a couple of due diligence talks where they asked like detailed questions to
Mm.
more to understand inside of our brain, like how we think about this business. And then, of course, we opened our data rooms where we have the
Yeah.
financial plans
Mm.
and everything.
Yeah.
We shared the contact numbers of our current users, so they would
Yeah.
do kind of a reference check. So everything worked well, actually, because especially if the investor you're talking to is used to invest in international companies,
Yeah.
that's how it is done. I mean, no one jumps
Yeah.
on a plane to
Yeah.
raise a
To
pre-seed
pick up and
fund
yeah. Yeah.
or an
Yeah. That's right.
accelerator.
Yeah.
Only super big ones, I guess. If you get accepted to YC, then you get a plane ticket to pitch in San Francisco,
Pitch in
but
yeah. Yeah.
otherwise it's not very viable.
Yeah. Yeah. This is awesome. I still remember the times, Bahadir. Like, I mean, in fact, across the world, all the supply chains were getting disrupted. Even we can still see the tremors of that. Like, I mean, even in the auto supply chain as of today, a lot of car manufacturers keep saying that we don't have enough chips to. The impact that we have seen in the manufacturing during that time was still we are seeing the ripples even today, as of today, Bahadir. I think what you're doing really makes sense. Like, I mean, effectively helping people to predict their own inventory and probably order that ahead of time so that there are no disruptions in their supply. I think you're probably right fit for the right time, Bahadir. I think the world has seen how impactful the supply chain disruptions can be in terms of and probably over dependence of China and few things around that. Like, I mean, I think the world is realizing that they want to have a distributed supply chain and things like that. So I think Bahadir, like, I mean, for the audience, like, I mean, if you can throw some light in terms of what exactly is Fabrikatör, how are you guys structured? How are you set up remotely? Like, I mean, so how does your day-to-day stuff looks like, and what's your role in general? Like, I mean, looking at in a outfit like a startup, like, I mean, so how does the whole journey looks like, Bahadir? So that would be a real good start.
So more about the product you want to hear, right?
Yeah, I think Fabrikatör. Yeah, more about
Okay, all
Fabrikatör.
right.
Yeah, yeah,
So during the pandemic, we also did a product pivot with our learnings from the manufacturers. We have seen a very good momentum in the e-commerce, and D2C brands were also getting bigger and bigger with the rise of e-commerce. So we decided to use our experience in manufacturing by helping brands on the other end in their supply planning. We noticed, like last year, everyone noticed what is the cost of running out of stock when you cannot
yep,
source your
yep,
products.
yep,
And this was actually a pretty good hot topic for most companies on e-commerce. So we had our early talks with our target users, asking them like, how do you manage your supply? And the answer was mostly Excels, sending them over email. If they're in China, the manufacturers, you send them over WeChat. So like depending on the supplier's location, the methodologies were different. But in the end, there was one problem. D2Cs own the data of the user, of the inventory and
yep,
everything. It's
yep,
the power they have compared to the typical retailer or a brand,
yep.
but managing that data is difficult. It means that pulling
Mm,
data from like different resources, marketing, inventory, supply chain, and catering everything together to find one answer. Like, what products do I need to restock, when, and how much? So we
yep,
designed a product where we connect to their Shopify stores. Shopify is our
yep,
first integration, where we read their inventory history, sales data, and forecast when each product is going to run out of stock. And then on top of that, we use the supplier data what is the lead time for this product, and in order to not run out of stock, when is the latest date that they should restock this item. And then that's how we prepare the planning for them. And now we automated this plan. We categorize their products based on their sales performance. The top priority ones should be restocked first. The ones which are not selling that very well needs to be liquidated by putting on discount or something. So Fabrikatör is helping them to plan, forecast, execute their plans, send purchase orders to their suppliers. And it's a B2B SaaS app. I forgot to mention, like, what is the format? You don't need to install it. It's available on Shopify App Store. So the merchants are just like, click install, it's ready. It doesn't need any installation. It's a self-service tool. So that actually makes our job quite easy in that sense. Since we're serving to global market, every customer is in a different time zone. And as a small team, we don't have the capacity to have live support 24/7, right? So in order to make it work, you need to build your product in a very clear way that everyone can do self-onboarding, and the user guidings should be very good inside the app. So that's what we worked on and overcome the difficulties in that sense. But yeah, that's Fabrikatör in a nutshell.
Awesome. So so this is for audience, Bahadir. If any of you guys are facing any supply disruption, give a shout out to Bahadir. He's reachable on LinkedIn, and we'll tag his profile on the podcast as well, guys. Like, I mean, just feel free to reach out to Bahadir, like, for any supply related stuff, if you're a D2C brand, especially. Awesome. Bahadir, so this brings me a very interesting thought process, right? So I've been a product manager before myself, and building a early product, like, especially at the early stages of product building, we keep calling this the 0 to 1 game, like, I mean, building an MVP, most viable product. So it's a lot of experimentation. It's about, like, talking to designers, talking to customers day in, day out, figuring out if they're liking the product. It's like, it takes a while for the product to get established, and especially the early stage of the product is where we keep talking to stakeholders. We constantly gather information, we constantly gather their feedback, everything about the product usage, and set up that things. And also, how was the journey like in terms of building a web product, especially like a SaaS product, a browser based product? How was the journey like in a remote setup, Bahadir?
So first we built prototypes on Excel. Almost every B2B SaaS product is competing with Excel, right? So we build it on Google Spreadsheets. We built prototypes on Google Spreadsheets, showed around to our prospective customers. We used some automation solutions like Zapier to make it look like a real product that's working. For example, in the prototype, users were typing the inventory they want to source, and then magically they were receiving an SMS on their phone saying that, oh, I just sent it to your supplier. If you accept it, press 1, press 2. That actually wasn't even an automation. When I'm doing the live demo, my co-founder was on the phone, keeping my phone on the desk. He's listening. And when the customer does that, he was sending an SMS manually. So that's how we tricked it. It's kind of like a mechanical Turk kind of a solution we did there. And it worked because as an early stage product, you just need to pass the message to the other side. What problem does it solve? The early stage users, early adopters, they don't care how it looks. They look at the problem, if it's solved or if it's promising for the future, and then they jump on the board. That was the first stage for us. That's how we learned the problem is real. They're interested in the solution. And now it is time for us to invest into the real product. And that point, although we love doing product design on both like UI side, we wanted to go simple. So we just looked at a bunch of UI libraries and bought one of the themes on like Team Forest and started to build on top of that. That actually helped us quite a lot. We didn't waste any time in designing components. So similar to our MVP approach, we were able to build something quick. But then we started iterating on it. Like we had some customers from Shopify, the people that we don't know. First, you start with people you know, so you can talk on a daily basis. If there's something goes wrong, you can always say, I'm sorry. But if it is a real customer that you don't know, then you need to have a solid product running, right? Because apology will not save you from getting a
Yeah.
1-star review on the App Store. So
Yeah. Yeah.
in that sense, we started to work with one of my favorite designers. He's someone that I knew from my previous job. I actually hired him in a company that I was working as a head of product, and then I moved on to Fabrikatör journey. He moved on to another company. I hired him as a freelancer. He helped us quite a lot on the UX side. Of course, we had to do a lot of asynchronous work
Yeah.
because my
Yeah.
team is located in Istanbul. I'm in
Mhm.
Berlin. My designer is in
Mm.
Berlin too, but we are still remote
Mm.
because
It's still
Corona.
remote. Yeah. There's no.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. We're all at our homes. Yeah.
it was the same when we were in Istanbul. This is our second startup with my co-founder. The first one was in 2015. Like there was no problem like Corona, but we were still doing it remote because traffic jam in Istanbul is crazy. You wouldn't want to waste your 3 hours going to the other side of the city. So
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes you just have to be remote. And if you see the advantages of the remote, that's actually quite beneficial for the company as well. Yeah, for the designer, what we did, I talked to customers, I took notes, I recorded every customer meeting, the user interviews that I was doing. I like doing jobs to be done kind of interviews with our users to better understand what challenge they're trying to solve, what are the
Yeah.
alternatives. By documenting
Yeah.
everything properly, I pass it
Yeah.
over to our designer. So
Mhm.
then we can work in an asynchronous level. Then he creates a sketch, some sketches. It can be even on a
Mm.
napkin, and then he
Yeah.
send me a picture. Good, let's
Mm.
move forward.
Yeah.
And then we meet. By doing
Mm.
that, we take out a lot of unnecessary discussions
Mm.
during an online
Mm.
call, which can take like 4 or
Mm.
5 hours, right? So we split the tasks into this
Mm.
and documenting. If we are talking about remote, like one thing I emphasize for myself, document everything. It is
Yeah.
not only
Mm.
for remote, but also
Yeah.
for traceability in the future. It's always
Future.
good to
Yep. Yeah. Mm.
look back,
Yeah.
like what were your thought process, because you change a lot of things as a founder at the early
Yeah.
stages. And sometimes like, I don't remember how we made this decision, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it will
Yeah.
help. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a very good point that you brought up, Bahadir. I think documentation is the key for efficient remote work, especially with the UI UX teams, and even for our own sanity, like to keep all the decisions documented and all. I think that's a good point, Bahadir. I think that you mentioned. Bahadir, in terms of the tools or the way you guys operate in terms of tech stack, like I mean, so what are the tools generally that you guys use, especially for collaboration and things around that, like I mean, with multiple teams? How does the day in day out, like I mean, looks like work looks like, Bahadir? Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, from the product planning perspective, I have to mention Clubhouse, not the
Okay.
audio chat one, not the one that you're looking for an
Oh
invite.
no! So I was thinking the moment you mentioned Clubhouse, I was wondering like.
Not that one. This Clubhouse was in our life before the cool Clubhouse. It's
Yeah.
clubhouse.io.
Yeah.
It's basically like Jira, and it's perfect for early stage teams. You can sign up for free. I've used it in another D2C company I was working at with more than 60 product people, including engineers. I was very happy with that in that company, and then I moved it to Fabrikatör. That's where we plan our backlog, do our strategic planning. So maybe a bit more detail about product process we have. We have milestones for every quarter, but we don't actually, not every quarter. We don't plan more than 6 months because it doesn't make
Okay.
sense for us. So we
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
have smaller goals, and we set a milestone and then break it down to epics and then go down to stories. Stories also have tasks. So we track our work based on that. Of course, we're changing a lot of things on the way, but as a collaboration for product, we use Clubhouse. It is integrated to our Slack. So whenever someone makes an update, we get a Slack notification. That's where we keep our documentation as a source of truth. On top of that, we have user interviews where
Mhm.
I document on our Google Drive.
Yeah.
I think, like I was talking about with my co-founder, like what are our favorite remote tools before the podcast, and I counted a bunch of tools, and he said, you didn't count Google Suite, you didn't count Google Drive. I was like, yeah, why I didn't count that? And I realized Google Suite is basically like water and electricity. It's a need.
Yeah,
Like
so
you
it's
don't
like
look at it.
everywhere.
Yeah, you don't look at it as a tool anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
it's given. It has to be there.
Yeah, it has to be there. That's right. That's rightly put in. Yeah.
So yeah, that's where we keep our financial plans and like other strategic level things where we access less often. I think as a company, if you're going for a remote stack, you should look at things from the format of the data. Like, are you going to
Yeah.
keep them in text, rich media, video, and then also
Yeah.
frequency? If you're going to reach something very frequently, it's better to have
Mm,
an easy access tool like it could be a Clubhouse for product management,
sure.
or any other note taking. Trello could be something else. But if you're going to reach these documents a bit less frequent, then Google Drive is the way to go. And there are different things that you can use. So that's one way to approach it. Other than that, of course, I mean, we are using GitHub for version
Yeah.
controlling and ticketing
Yeah.
on more technical
Yeah.
side. I don't
Yeah.
even. I'm not even sure if we should count them as like remote tools because they were in our lives
They're
before.
everywhere. Yeah. Yeah. They're in our lives. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what else we have? I mean, similar to GitHub, Hotjar or a full story
Yeah.
kind of tools. You also use them for building
Yeah.
engagement with your users, like how they use it to understand,
Mm, mm,
empathize with them.
mm.
Um, other than that, I think, yeah, analytics tools, Figma, we are using for design collaboration with our designer. We do all the comments and collaboration over Figma. Once the design is ready, then I move it to Clubhouse. So that's kind of the workflow we have on that side.
Yeah. So how do you manage different time zones, Bahadir? Like, I mean, so if you have distributed teams, like, I mean, so probably, especially let's say if we're in US and or any other different time zone, like, I mean, how do you manage? Like, do you have something like a overlap? You make sure that the entire team comes on a daily Scrum Agile, like, I mean, any Scrum call or things like that. So how do you manage the coordination across different distributed teams, Bahadir? Like,
Mhm. Um, like currently at Fabrikatör, it's not difficult because the time difference between Germany and Turkey is just 2 hours.
yeah,
Only like early morning calls can be tricky for
yeah,
me
yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm in Germany and it's very early for me when it is noon for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
guys.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but we found a middle way. Like we had our daily talks at 9 a.m. Germany, 11 a.m. Turkey. So that was fine. I think within the team, it's easy. What's more difficult for me, the user interviews and the customer talks, because most
Yeah,
of our
yeah,
customers in US,
yeah, mm,
there is no practical solution for this. Like as a
yeah.
founder, I just don't sleep when I have a call. So that's the only solution. Uh, I'm using a HubSpot meeting calendar, so I send this like meeting link to my
Sure. Mm,
customers. It's like I'm flexible on my calendar, but I make sure that I sleep between like 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. So I'm not bookable
yeah,
between these
yeah,
times.
yeah. These time
Um,
slots. Yeah, yeah.
Another way to manage, one of the tools that I started use during the pandemic is Loom.
Mm,
So if a customer is asking a question about a product feature that they didn't understand, I quickly record the Loom video and send to them. They can watch it while I'm sleeping, and then that's how we keep the asynchronous communication with our users by recording
mm,
videos.
mm, mm. I think Loom is really helpful for asynchronous. I think we have seen that really working for us as well, Bahadir. I think that's a good tool, especially meant for this asynchronous communication. Awesome. So, how are you seeing remote in general, Bahadir? Do you see the trend of future of work, like I mean, especially remote, going forward as well? Like, hopefully, we all get vaccinated, the entire world will come back to regular work, like I mean, so in terms of normalcy and things like that. So, do you foresee we being in remote setup, like I mean, given the advantages we have seen with remote working, just like you mentioned in Istanbul, it takes 3 hours from one side of the city to the other side. Like I mean, the commute, the daily commute problems, and all the stuff. Do you foresee, like I mean, working in a remote setup, even let's say after 2 years? Like, I mean, how do you see that in general? Your thoughts on that, Pradeep?
Mhm. I think it will never be the same as before. Now everyone
Yeah,
understood the remote with its benefits and also difficulties. So before, digital nomads were cool, right? Everyone was like, "I
yeah.
want to become a digital nomad. I can work
Digital mad.
whenever
Yeah,
I want.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
perfect." but that was a minority. Now the general public, the whole industry knows what it is like, and now people start to think. I mean, you know it better than me. You're in the West Coast, right? So Silicon Valley, people are fleeing from there. They're using their
Yep,
same
yep.
salary, living a better life in Colorado for
Super
like
cool
having
of,
a
yeah,
ranch, you
exactly.
know?
Yeah. I have seen enough of my friends migrated to Texas, Austin, and all these places recently, but they're like, and especially from the Bay Area, and they're buying like such big, rich houses now. Like, I mean, they used to live in pretty small, compressed homes. Now they're like, I mean, completely very different people. Yeah.
So now, like, are companies going to be able to bring these people back to these expensive cities? I don't think so,
Yeah,
and
I don't
I
think
don't
so.
know why
Yep.
they would, because companies are
Yeah,
also paying crazy rents for the office space.
that's right.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
now I see like a lot of good trends where companies invest these money into their employees, work from home setup, sending them
Yep.
gifts regularly, keep the motivation
Yeah.
and the connection up. So like this is going to stay like this. I think there will be some group of people who will want to go back to office.
Yeah.
So this will bring us to the hybrid solution, and that's where I also like it, because in remote I'm missing most the human connection. As a product
Yeah.
manager, you are
Yeah.
actually a bridge between your teammates, so
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you get friends with everyone, you understand what are the strengths and the weaknesses of everyone in the team, or like what pisses them off, or like what they like, who they like to work with, and then you take all of this information and make things work by bridging people, right?
Yeah.
So when you are working remote, it is difficult to read emotions, it is difficult to
Yeah.
understand
Yeah. Yeah.
reactions of people.
Yeah.
You don't know
Yeah.
what's happening
Mm.
after or before the call. But if you're
Yep.
in the office, you can tell if someone's upset, broke up with his girlfriend. You can take him out for a coffee, you know?
So
This
we're missing all the coffee conversations about it. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And like coffee breaks, smoking breaks, water cooler chats, these are the
Yeah.
things that makes people feel like they're connected.
Yeah.
And now this is missing. I see like a lot of tech solutions trying to tackle it. As far as I see, there's a lot of good products out there, and I think VR is going to be also a solution there. Like a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
companies now giving out
Yeah.
VR glasses to have
Yeah.
virtual
Yeah.
Happy Fridays. But it's cool, but I don't feel like we are there yet in terms of
There yet. Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah. Mm.
It's a progressive technology, but yeah, will be difficult. What I'm curious about the remote industry in general, now I'm wearing my CEO hat and thinking about more boring stuff. Like, if I hire someone from a different continent, from a different
Yeah.
country, how's it going to
Yeah.
work in terms of
Yeah.
compensation? Are you still
Yeah.
going to pay your Silicon Valley employees the same
Mm.
salary, even though they are living
Mm.
somewhere in South America, where life
Yeah.
is quite
Mm.
cheap? How is it going
Yeah.
to work with the legal stuff like
Yeah. Mm.
intellectual property, NDAs,
Yeah.
and
Mm. Indians.
in
Yep. All the documentation. Yep.
in
IP
terms of
protection.
conflict?
Everything.
Yeah, in
Yep.
terms
Yep.
like if there's a conflict, which legislation will be in place, which country's
Yeah.
legislation that you will follow, tax, like
Yeah.
all of these things as a CEO are freaking me out, because
Yeah.
these are not things that you can easily solve with tax
Yeah.
solutions. These are on the bureaucratic country, like
Yeah.
country level
These are
problems
the
that
these are the
diplomacy.
real world problems. Real world problems, as they say, right? Yeah.
Right. So now I'm expecting to see countries to step up and say that we are flexing some rules and regulations for remote workers, where you can hire anyone from any country. We will have this like bilateral agreements with other countries that we work with to make it easy. I guess today France announced that they have just like announced an online application for digital workers, like remote workers, which is a good step up.
Mm. Yep. Mm.
Estonia was already doing digital residency for
Digital
remote
residency.
workers.
Yep.
So I'm
Yep.
expecting to see more and more innovative steps from governments in that sense.
Awesome, awesome. Since you are from Turkey, Bahadir, like I mean, so how is Turkey as a place for remote working? So I have been a digital nomad from the last 4 or 5 years. Personally, traveled about 50 countries so far. Like I mean, so I didn't get a chance to visit Turkey yet. But how is for a digital nomad? If I'm a digital nomad, I just want to go to Turkey, work there for 3 6 months. So how is that experience, or like, and what do you suggest for anyone planning to travel to Turkey to do digital nomad stuff, Bahadir? Yeah.
Wow, that was my dream actually. As a Turkish person, I wanted to be a digital nomad in Turkey because the natural beauty in that country is
Yeah.
amazing. Like, if we had this plan where we wanted to buy a van
Hmm.
and with a very strong mobile internet. So while two guys at the back coding, one is driving, and then
Hmm.
we take shifts and tour around the country and have this kind of a hackathon bus, I would say. Uh,
Awesome.
paying for the gas by writing code at the back seat. So this kind of a dream I had. And I was doing a lot of camping in Turkey. So that's why I know like a lot of natural beauties. That's the best part. In terms of culture, Turkish people are quite hospitable.
Yeah.
You will never sleep hungry any night. They will be always
Awesome.
coming to your door with a hot soup,
Awesome.
offering you bed and
Awesome.
place.
Awesome.
So it's a very good country in that sense. And because of the currency difference, it's a sad
Yeah.
reality of the country nowadays. But
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
earn in
Yeah.
dollars and euros, it
Yeah.
will be a
Hmm.
heaven for you. You will have the
Yeah.
best food and the best holidays
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. Any must-visit places in Turkey that you would suggest for digital nomads, Bahadir?
Oh, well, everyone starts from Istanbul. I think Istanbul is
Hmm.
a good summary of Turkey. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
mosaic
Hmm.
of the cultural diversity we
Culture.
have there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting a sense of the country in Istanbul is like internship 101 to Turkey, and then you
Awesome.
can go to more traditional parts. I think west coast of Turkey is beautiful, where the coast
Sure.
looking
Hmm.
at Greek part, the islands we have are amazing. I think like the only limitation I see there is just having a solid internet connection wherever you go.
Okay. Hmm.
That's
Okay.
that. If you
Hmm.
sort
Hmm.
that out, I think
Then
I
that's
think
a
you're
heaven.
set.
Yeah, that's a heaven. Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. So I'll probably make a visit sometime, Bahadir. That's in my checklist.
Let
Let
me
me see
know. I
how it
was a
goes.
tourist guide in Turkey, so I can help
Oh,
you with
awesome,
everything.
awesome. I know who to reach out to then. It's super cool. Super cool. So how is Bahadir outside of work? Like, so what's his personal views and things like that? Like, so how, like, what are the hobbies or interests that you generally do other than running Fabrikatör or getting occupied in the work? So how is Bahadir as a in person in general, Bahadir? Like, so probably about your hobbies or things that you're crazy about. Yeah, your passions.
Yeah. Um, that's a tough question for me. Ask me anything, but when you ask about the hobbies, I'm a jack of all trades, but master of none. I jump from one thing to another quite fast. But one thing I've been consistently doing is cycling. I really like
Hmm,
going
hmm,
around the
hmm,
city, exploring
hmm.
places that I would never explore. Like, it's not a highlight on the Google Maps, but I
Yeah,
still want to go
yeah.
see. That I make like fake excuses for myself to go see villages around Berlin, which is very nice. Um, Another thing I've been doing consistently was community building. So I really
Hmm,
like
hmm,
bringing people
hmm,
together on any
hmm,
occasion. It could be product
hmm,
management, it
hmm,
could
hmm,
be support groups like NGOs
hmm,
and kind of things. In Berlin, I had a very good friend organizing a product meetup. Maybe it's a shout out from here. It's called On Product. And nowadays, because of Corona, anyone around the world can join On Product meetups online. So just look for it on the meetup.com as On Product, where
Sure.
we
Hmm,
were organizing product meetups, inviting product leaders from different companies, small and big. And we were they were hosting us at their conference saloons, were treating us with pizzas and beers. So our tickets were always sold out, not sold out because we were not selling them. We were just, it was a free organization, but it was always booked out in the first
yeah.
2 days. So I remembering back like what we were doing, it was quite of a fun. That's what I enjoy most, and I'm actually looking forward to do something similar online nowadays.
Hmm,
Maybe
hmm.
inspired from your podcast, I can start a D2C podcast.
No, I think that's the trend. In fact, the new Clubhouse is also the trend, Bahadir. Like, I would suggest give it a shot, especially the audio and the podcast and the Clubhouse ones. I think that's a way to build in the community, Bahadir. I think this has become a pretty good stuff. Awesome, awesome. So, what are your top three favorite books, Bahadir? Like, I mean, so if you have to name the best that you have read so far, like, or something that you're reading for our audience, what are your top three favorite books?
Yeah. Um, so the first one is probably very well known by product managers, but it's called Competing Against Luck, The Story of Innovation and
Yeah.
Customer Choice by Clayton Christensen, who sadly passed away last year. While one of my
Mm, mm,
authors, favorite authors, whom I learned the jobs
mm,
to be done practice from
mm,
him.
mm,
That's like a bedside book for me. I always go back to this book
mm,
whenever I feel
mm,
like lost in customer interviews. The
mm,
second one, a book gifted by my co-founder last year as a New Year's
mm,
gift, called "The Hard
mm.
Thing About Hard Things" by Ben
Yeah, this is my
Horowitz.
favorite as well. This is my favorite as well,
It,
Bahadir.
it,
Yeah,
it is amazing because
yeah,
you don't only get to learn about what kind of a
yeah,
path he went through as a
yeah,
founder, but also as a
yeah,
human. A lot of
yeah,
emotion in that book, like the ups
yeah,
and downs, I can totally relate to when you feel like,
yeah,
oh my God, this shit is going wrong. You know what I'm going to do?
yeah,
I have people on the
yeah,
payroll. And then
yeah,
the
mm,
highs of the story where you are, okay, we're going
mm,
to rock this. But always
mm,
this roller coaster. You feel this
yeah,
when you're
yeah.
reading the book from Ben, and it's an amazing book.
Awesome, awesome.
The third one is a bit different. Maybe you can relate to
Mm,
that.
mm.
It's a book called "Think on These Things" by Jiddu Krishnamurti. He's
Interesting. So I have been one of his favorite. Like I mean, so I have been reading a lot about his philosophy and things like that as well. So I'm pretty curious. How did you bump into that aspect of life about it? Like, that he's a very interesting personality. Like, I mean, very very interesting, super interesting personality in general.
he is a very inspiring person for me. It goes
Yeah.
back to high school years when I
Hmm.
was reading philosophy, and around
Hmm.
that time there was this very famous documentary called Zeitgeist, and in
Hmm. Yep.
Zeitgeist
I guess.
there's a
Yep. Hmm.
they took a part of Jittu Krishnamurti's speech
Hmm.
and like
Hmm.
mixed it with the documentary, and I was like, this sounds very powerful, like the way he speaks. Who is
Yep.
this guy? And then I
Yep.
started to find his books and started to read. The reason I like this book particularly, it makes you think a lot about emotions, how we process
Yeah.
them,
Hmm.
and how we
Yeah.
make other people feel, and like questioning the very fundamental things from the bottom, like ground to the top. Um, I always been on the more like questioning side, criticizing side of things in my life.
Yeah. Hmm.
This
Yeah.
book, this book can be my Bible actually. If I'm not over selling it, it could be like
Awesome, awesome. So very interesting personal thing, Bahadir. So I have built the mobile app for the Ziddu Krishnamurti Foundation. So all his learnings, all his books and everything. So there is a foundation that's been run by a couple of folks in Hyderabad. This is in South India. Like, I mean, so in fact, there are a couple of schools, colleges. There's an education system that's being run. On the principles he taught, like, I mean, so as philosopher, right, I think his own way of teaching, it's a very different school, alternative form of education and things like that. So we got all his content uploaded to the mobile app. Like, I mean, so I was lucky to be part of this is about 3 years back. So I have a personal connection with Jiddu Krishnamurti that way. But so
amazing.
super
This
interesting to know that you're a big fan as well. Yeah.
this just gave me goosebumps. Like this is amazing. I wasn't expecting such coincidence here. I'm super happy to hear that. Make sure sending me the link after the call.
Sure, sure, sure. Awesome, awesome. So one final question, Bahadir. So what are your top three favorite remote tools, especially for collaboration and things like that? So what are your top three favorite remote tools?
Yeah, I think we briefly touched on that, but for
Yeah,
communication, like I was thinking which tools that we cannot live without. Slack is definitely top one.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Not only in my company, but right now I have 9 different workspaces on my Slack
Hmm,
with our
hmm,
investors,
hmm,
some other co-founder groups, like Shopify communities on Slack, a lot of
hmm,
different Slacks I have. And I think it is a very good way to connect and communicate with people. And
hmm,
Loom is the second one.
hmm.
When you
Yeah.
are bored
Hmm.
of writing long messages on Slack, you can just record a
Yep.
Loom and
Yeah.
send it
You
out.
can just record. Yeah. Yep. Mm.
For collaboration, like document collaboration, Google Suite
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
tried Notion for a while. I
Mm.
really love
Mm.
the simplicity of Notion, so that can be the second. And the last one for planning and product perspective, it's Clubhouse.io, not the wrong Clubhouse.
Awesome. In fact, after our conversation, Bahadir, so I'll definitely check out Clubhouse. I'm pretty curious what is it and things like that. So let me check that out, Bahadir. Awesome, awesome. So I think this has been a pretty interesting conversation, Bahadir. Thanks a lot for picking the time and sharing your all your learnings on remote work. And this is a really super interesting conversation about remote and especially the fundraising part. I think that's really inspiring, Bahadir. I think that's a lot of learning for a lot of founders and entrepreneurs out there who are listening to this podcast. I think this is definitely any last final words of message for our remote workers or around remote in general, how you see that going forward, Bahadir? Yeah.
Mhm. Um, I think remote can easily be very difficult if you
Yeah.
forget about yourself. So always take a good care of yourself, healthy
Yeah.
body, healthy
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
most of your day. Invest into your well-being. Always remember that there are people behind these cameras, behind these
Yeah.
computers,
Yeah. Yeah.
and including yourself. So that's
Mm.
what I would say. Meditate, eat healthy, go out for
Yeah.
jogging, and also don't forget to feed your soul, do some music,
Yeah.
do something
Yeah.
else other
Yeah.
than work.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
would say as the last word.
Awesome, awesome. This is really, really helpful. I think taking care of mental health, especially in remote environment, is the key, guys. I think that's the message from Bahadir. Awesome, Bahadir. Thanks a lot for sharing all your insights and all your learnings. And we'll stay tuned, Bahadir, to this conversation. Yeah.
Thank you very
I'll,
much, Raghu. Thank you.
thanks a lot, Bahadir. Yeah.